zero-based budgeting strategies, which I happen to think the government should deploy. I want to know, as Congressman, how do you see yourself, or what roles or actions do you see yourself playing to help influence this kind of budgeting and in order to reduce our taxes?
Yeah, I use this quick phrase. I say freeze, cap, and cut. Let's first of all freeze the spending right now. If I were a member of Congress today, and again, one of the things that I think Congress needs is just regular, average, everyday people trying to solve the problems. Let's freeze spending, number one. Let's just freeze it. Just stop. You got to stop the bleeding that's going on. Instead, the Senate is considering raising the debt ceiling by $1.9 trillion. So they still don't get it. And that news came out after Tuesday's election. I would then do a review, top to bottom, of every federal organization. I am sure there's a little bit of waste somewhere in the federal budget. I think that whether you're independent, Democrat, or Republican, you probably agree with that statement. So let's do a top-to-bottom review of every department. I mean, people ask me, do you support auditing the Fed? Of course I do. I think we should audit everything. Audit every department that spends your money. And then, depending on the department and the responsibility, because I like to prioritize, and I think we should as a nation prioritize, we should cut appropriately, and probably larger cuts in some areas than in other areas. I mean, again, when you look at your household budget, do you cut everything equally across the board? You can't call your mortgage company up and say, I'm cutting your payment to 10%. But you can make decisions within your entire budget on how you spend the resources that you have. And I hear this term, well, discretionary spending versus non-discretionary. Everything is discretionary, people. You know, when I looked at the city budgets for Manchester, $280 million, it's all discretionary. How you decide to spend that money is up to you. Now, people do expect certain levels of service. People expect that they have safe streets. People expect that the garbage is going to get picked up. People expect that the roads are going to be plowed. Then you have to determine what is the cost associated of those services. And you figure out the best way to have the most efficient manner to get those things done. I'm not even sure that members of Congress know the salary line item budget for the federal government. I mean, when I was mayor, I could tell you for every department what the salary line item was. I could tell, I mean, we spend $15 million a year in Manchester on health insurance costs alone. We're self-insured. I know how to reduce that cost, and actually I'll get into one of the things that we're doing that we implemented last year that is started. That's actually a success. But zero-based budgeting is very simple. What used to happen in budgets and what happens in most budgets is you take the previous year budget and then you add to it. You say, that's my budget request. Zero-based budgeting is you throw that budget away as if it never existed, and you build from the ground up the responsibilities that you are that are governed by your governing body to provide. They don't always have to be the same responsibilities year in and year out. But it's a big mistake that is made, and that's why the size of government, the scope of government expands each and every year. So when I went into zero-based budgeting my first year, the department heads were not exactly thrilled about it. I did put in the budget process, which is a little, I would recommend any government official. You obviously have a computer-based system where you're entering your budget in. Ours in Manchester was called HTE. I had, at the bottom of each page, you had to justify every expenditure over $2,000, or you couldn't get to the next page in the budget. Now, they didn't like that. The budget process for them was longer, required more time. But guess what? Taxpayers appreciated it. And we were able to find pots of money in different departments that didn't have any purpose. And we reduced those things. We cut those things out of the budget. When people say, you know, where are you going to cut? Believe me, there are places you can cut. There are things you can do to be more efficient. There are more competitive approaches to providing services that either private sector provides or the public sector provides. And the zero-based budgeting process, I think, taught the department heads, the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, and the taxpayers a very strong lesson that you can restrict the amount of money that you spend. But I will tell you, cutting taxes is difficult. It's not easy. The easy way out is to raise taxes. Anybody can do it. You can raise taxes. All you have to do is say, we need more money. You can always get the votes for that. The hard work is trying to cut taxes, trying to cut spending, and provide that level of service that you've always provided. That's the challenge. That's difficult. But that's what drove me as a mayor. I enjoyed finding ways to do things cheaper and quicker and better. And I think by extension, the taxpayers appreciate it. But that's what government is. Government is supposed to function efficiently and effectively, and it can do a lot of wonderful things. But it's got to be focused on its responsibilities. It shouldn't be going outside of its responsibilities. I would have a top-to-bottom review done of every department, and then I would make an assessment. And I say that because I believe in prioritizing. I suspect that every department could be at least cut 1% and probably somewhere between 1 and 10%. Beyond that, people have asked me, earmarks are a problem. I got to tell you, earmarks are a very small fraction of the problem. If you cut spending, you cut earmarks. Now, we talk about research that's done or bridges to nowhere, things of that nature. That's a small part of the problem. And we get sidetracked on it. What we need to do is look at our overall spending and reduce that. We are not focusing first on how much money we're taking in and then looking at that as the cap, as to how we spend our dollars. What we're doing is just saying, here's how much we need to spend and let's figure out how to generate that revenue. And I believe that that's a wrong approach to any entity, whether it's a public entity or a private entity. Yes, sir.
My concern, as well as I'm sure another is the issue with the aging, and when you enter office, you're going to be hitting the baby boomers next year. That's going to begin to increase that requirement for Social Security and Medicare, and how is that going to be handled, in your opinion?
Well, this issue has been tried to be resolved before, and so far it hasn't. Here's how I would answer that question. As a nation, we have to prioritize. There are existing benefits that people receive that I think you've got to continue providing. And I liken it to what I tried to do in the city. If you were promised a benefit, I don't think it's right to now take it away. However, you've got to do something moving forward. That's what cities have to do. That's what states have to do. And pension reform is a tremendously challenging issue. Nobody wants to talk about it because the reality is, moving forward, you're not going to receive the same benefit that somebody got 20 years ago. But if we want to have an honest discussion about spending, we have to somehow get our hands around the entitlements moving forward. I think we should honor our commitments that have already been made. Put that aside and start with a new proposal, a new plan going forward, and try to figure out what's fair and what the country can afford. But if we don't do that, we're not going to get the debt and the deficit under control. So there are going to be some tough choices that future Congress has to make. But I will tell you what, they should be informed decisions. They should be decisions that are done openly and honestly, and there should be input from the public.